haven't got a problem coming out the car. Just want to make sure I'm not handcuffed. Can't go anywhere. I'm out, man. I can't move now.
That was a video that Ryan Colasso filmed recently in London while being stopped and searched in his car. What the police in this video didn't know was that when they stopped him, Ryan was actually driving home from doing an interview about police racial profiling, because he's been stopped 22 times.
At times I can be followed, and it is interesting to say it as a location scout, because that means I'm all over the UK. It's just something that's sitting in my head all the time, and again, I still find it very surreal. And it was literally like, not again.
This can't keep happening to me, man.
If you're black in the UK, you're 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police than if you're white. In the US, close to 80% of people in federal prison for drug crimes are black or Latinx. The war on drugs has fundamentally reshaped the way we live. It affects everybody's lives, but it doesn't affect everyone the same. These laws function very differently for people who look like Ryan than for people who look like me.
It's called proactive policing in the UK, and I've seen it. They look and they immediately stop you. Between those seconds of them stopping you, they're talking to each other and saying, what should we say when we see it? What should we say? What should we say? Should we about drugs?
You're searching for drugs. You don't really have any reason to anyway. I've not done anything.
There's quite a smell of cannabis.
There's a large smell of cannabis.
There's a large smell of cannabis. Did you just say there's a large smell of cannabis coming from my vehicle?
Yeah.
Is there something wrong with you? Is there something wrong with you? I've never smoked anything in my life.
What happened to Ryan is not a bug in the war on drugs. It's a feature. Racism is written into its source code. These are issues that people of colour have reported on tirelessly from across the world. And what we're going to do now is show how what happened to Ryan in London in 2020 has its roots in what happened in America in the 1880s.
Treating us like animals, as they call us, thugs, as they call us.
This notion of implicit bias, seeing a young black man and just making an assumption about who he is, what he's about, how likely is he to be involved in criminal activity simply because of the way he looks.
Up through the 19th century, drugs we now consider illegal were widely used across the world, mainly for pain relief. Then came the American railroads. In the mid-1800s, hundreds of thousands of Chinese workers came to America to work on the railways. But when the tracks were complete, they were seen as a threat to white American workers. American racists found that an effective way to stir up anti-Chinese hatred was to demonize the practice of opium smoking. Lurid, race-baiting descriptions of Chinese opium dens began appearing in California newspapers. This strategy worked. In 1882, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, the only US law to ever successfully ban immigration solely on the basis of race.
The context of the way in which US drug policy was developed was that there was always, for each drug, a specific racialized link. So the very first anti-narcotic laws targeted opium and opium use, but it specifically targeted it the way that Chinese communities used it. So what was illegal was smoking opium. It's not using it in pills, which were the ways in which white people used it.
Flash forward a couple of decades, and a new drug emerged to capture America's fevered imagination, and a fresh racial minority to use it to persecute.
You mean I've been taking dope? Yeah, dope. Cocaine. The kid catcher.
Once enslaved, its victims sink ever deeper into a quagmire of moral decay.
Haven't you any pride or decency left? You used to be sweet and clean.
The drug was cocaine, and the minority, African Americans.
That's when you started seeing stories in the paper talking about Negro cocaine fiends. And the stories were so prevalent that many local police departments throughout the South increased the caliber of the bullets that they were using because they came to believe you needed a bigger bullet to bring down a black man who was on cocaine. We know, in fact, that that's not true.
It was these campaigns and stories that in 1914 led to the passing of the Harrison Narcotics Act, the first federal attempt at drug prohibition, and the blueprint for what would eventually become the global war on drugs. In the national conversations leading up to the passing of the Harrison Act, one medical expert gave this warning. If you want to understand just how deeply the origins of the war on drugs are rooted in racist violence, that text we just saw should make it clear. But really, the drug war didn't properly get going until this guy came along. This is Harry Anslinger. In many ways, he's really the architect of the modern war on drugs. Anslinger started running the newly founded Federal Bureau of Narcotics, known as the FBN, in 1930.
The DEA has inherited the history of racism and misogyny that dominated that agency throughout the period of Anslinger, and that they see themselves as being at war, and the people that they are at war with are primarily people of color. So he was very focused on things like cannabis and heroin and drugs that could be associated with racial minorities.
Drug prohibition, driven by racial anxieties, grew and grew in importance in American law enforcement. This only became more pronounced in the 1960s, as drug use became associated with counterculture, the civil rights movement, and the opposition to the Vietnam War. It was Nixon who formally declared a war on drugs in 1971. And this is where federal spending on drug enforcement begins to really transform into the monster it is today. But even under Nixon's new war on drugs, there was still at least some emphasis on drug treatment and rehabilitation. For the origins of the militarized dystopian war on drugs we know and love in 2020, we have to wait for the 1980s and the racist hysteria that surrounded crack cocaine. Crack wasn't actually a new drug at all. It's simply cocaine that's been treated so you can smoke it instead of snort it. But the way it was treated by the authorities and the media was entirely different.
This is at the same time that Hollywood was celebrating cocaine use, where people walked around with little silver spoons around their neck and nobody thought that there was any problem with that. At the same time, the police were busy going out into Black communities and sweeping up Black people for small amounts of crack cocaine and locking them up.
Before 1986, the average federal sentence for African Americans was already 11% higher than for white criminals. After 4 years of crack hysteria, it had rocketed to 49%. This is where the war on drugs really starts to look like a war. Police began to look like soldiers, and American money started to flood into military-style drug enforcement operations around the world. It was also this era of the drug war that saw America begin its mania for mass incarceration.
The prison population of the United States was flat in most of the 20th century. The last 50 years is this era shaped by a commitment to mass incarceration and excessive punishment. Prison population goes from 300,000 to 2.3 million, and this has really redefined the kind of country we are, the kind of place we inhabit. I think the greatest tragedy of the era of mass incarceration has been its impact on people of color.
America has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. And there are very clear racial disparities in this. The Bureau of Justice estimates that if you're a white male in the US, there's a 1 in 17 chance you'll go to jail or prison at some point in your lifetime. For Hispanic males, it's 1 in 6. For African Americans, 1 in 3.
Did I win the war on drugs? No. In fact, I don't even think I made a dent in the war on drugs. We've incarcerated a whole generation of people, mostly African Americans, and we haven't solved the drug problem like we've purported to do. Yes, we put a lot of people in prison, but most of the people that we put in prison, or at least a good number of them, were put there for nonviolent drug arrests.
The system tilts in a direction that is unjust, and particularly when you think about nonviolent drug offenses. This is an area where the statistics are so skewed. You have to question whether we have become numb to the cost that it has on these communities, whether we think it's somehow normal for Black youth or Latino youth to be going through the system in this way. It's not normal.
This continues today, on the streets in 2020. When George Floyd was killed in Minnesota, this is what one police officer called out while he watched.
How long y'all gotta hold him down?
Why would you don't do drugs, kids?
So we see over and over again that when police kill someone, particularly somebody unarmed, they look for some history of drugs or drug involvement as if somehow that justifies their action, even though at most it's only tangential. Every community at every socioeconomic level uses drugs at pretty much the same level. So the fact that these things keep happening primarily to Black and brown people has nothing to do with the drugs. It has everything to do with drug law enforcement.
In the UK, police often claim they use stop and search powers to deal with knife crime. But in London, over the first 7 months of this year, only about 20% of searches were for knives, while over 65% were carried out under the Misuse of Drugs Act. The burden of this falls massively disproportionately on people of colour. And it's not just in street-level policing, it's the entire criminal justice system. People of colour are not only more likely to be arrested, but when they are arrested, they're more likely to receive prison sentences and for a longer time.
This is really kind of a touchy subject for me. My father was in prison. He had life in the feds. Also, I'm in prison. Then on top of that, I have sons. 2 of my sons went to prison. So they followed the same footprints as I did with my father. Nobody was there for them. With that being said, we need to be there for our family. We need to be there for our sons.
I haven't hugged my son for so many years. I hunger for that day.
I think it's important for us to remember when we think about the deaths of Rodney King, Laquan McDonald, Terrence Crutcher, Philando Castile, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, that these people were all in some way caught up in the war on drugs, and that was used to justify their premature death at the hands of law enforcement.
In a historical moment where we're radically reconsidering how racial politics has shaped the world, recognizing how the war on drugs has always been driven by racist policies, from its origin up until today, is crucial for every one of us to understand. And maybe then, we might be able to imagine something better.